I know you guys are super busy at this moment, so it's not even a question of I am definitely appreciative of you joining and finding the time to do that. So we'll get going. We're not fancy. We're just, we just that's why that's why I like you. You're not a uh, sorry. That's why I like you. Yeah, I've been watching and watching the goings on, and so I thought it'd be nice to kind of hear you talk for a little bit, sense of what the future unfolds. I mean, there's a long road ahead of you guys, and I think it's a long road ahead for Guyana, and I hope that young folks like you can be a part of that conversation going forward. So, having said that, let me just jump into it and actually say good evening and things like that. So,
Uh,
so to
can you
well,
comment on the quality of the audio so I can
yeah,
know
the quality
I can
of
decide
the audio
whether
is
I need
fine.
to plug in my earpiece?
No, the quality of
Audio is good.
the audio is
Fantastic.
good. Yeah. Good evening, colleagues, and welcome to the post Guyana Business Journal election conversations. And as usual, I'm Terrence Blackman, professor and chair of mathematics at Medgar Evers College in the City University of New York. And tonight I wanted to continue this uh, exploration of leadership in Guyana in this defining era. And as many of you know, here at the Guyana Business Journal, our mission goes beyond sort of mere commentary. We champion rigorously researched, data-driven analysis that should inform policy for a prosperous, inclusive, and democratic Guyana. So that's broadly where we stand in terms of what we're trying to do. And tonight we wanted to kind of shift the gears some and focus on a theme that's particularly close to our hearts. Sort of, as a professor, I'm always involved in thinking about how to bring young people and their talent to actualization. It's the thing that pleases me the most. And so, I've themed this set of conversations, new voices, new vision, kind of engaging Guyana's youth and hopefully connecting the youth to the broad youth in the diaspora and more broadly to our Guyanese diaspora community. And I'm joined by Ronald Daniels, a distinguished attorney at law who recently emerged as one of the most compelling new voices in the Guyanese political scene. And Ronald brings really a unique perspective to the political arena. I think one that is shaped by his own personal adversity, professional, and really an unwavering commitment to service. He was a candidate with the Partnership for National Unity, and tonight we're not going to. We'll explore not only the political vision, but also just you know, your plans to kind of engage the next generation of Guyanese leaders. In a sense, both at home and abroad. So, Ronald Daniels, welcome to the Guyana Business Journal, and before we dive into like the political vision, I want our audience to, particularly those here in the diaspora, to understand the man, behind the message. Your story is one I believe will resonate deeply with many of our viewers, who like you have faced struggles in pursuit of better opportunities. And so, take us back to your early life and paint a picture for us of the household that shapes the man that we see today.
Terence, thank you ever so much. I want to thank the viewers for taking the time. I'm always deeply appreciative of anybody who takes the time to log in and connect and to allow me an opportunity to really engage. And it's a tremendous honor to have the opportunity to sit and converse with you, Terence. I've really been following your work over the years. I know that your contributions, both overseas and locally, have been seminal. I'm a committed fan. I just want you to know that. And I want to thank you personally for doing what you have been doing, both locally and abroad.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Certainly most welcome. So I was born in the mining town of Linden. I
Yeah.
spent perhaps my first 2 years in Linden, and then my mother moved to Grove on the East Bank. I think we probably lived. My mother probably lived in the East Bank before she went to Linden, where I was born. But she moved to Grove on the East Bank together with me, my two siblings, my two older sisters. We moved in with our grandmother and my aunts. Our circumstances were relatively humble. I didn't appreciate then how humble our circumstances were until I had the benefit of hindsight after becoming more conscious, so to speak. Um, but we've grown up in really humble circumstances. My family was a really close knitted family. I've grown up primarily with women,
Yes.
with my aunts, my sisters, my grandmother, and my mother. Quite unfortunately, there weren't a lot of older male figures
What were
around.
the names? I mean, I'm always, what were the names? I think it's always important to, name more people.
Well,
And
certainly, certainly. So the matriarch of our family, that's my grandmother. She was Agnes Daniels. She's now deceased. But I like to think that she lives on through me because her impact upon my life has been considerable. My mother, she is Marcia Veronica Daniels, and I do emphasize the Veronica because whenever she introduces herself, she always ensures that she says to you, "I am Marcia Veronica Daniels." She says that boldly and confidently. The aunts I grew up with were Winifred Daniels, uh, Myrtle O'Brien, Osmond Sparman, Odessa Sparman. Those are my aunts. My uncles, they were present somewhat, but they lived elsewhere, so they would come and visit every so often. Ernest Daniels, Wilfred Daniels, Elvis Daniels, who quite unfortunately is now deceased, and Oswald O'Brien, who is now deceased quite unfortunately. And my sisters, they are Roxanne King and Susan King. And my cousins, since I mentioned the names, if they're
yeah,
watching and I
I
don't
think it's
mention them, of
important.
course.
I think when people see people, they kind of imagine that they come to the world fully formed without
Uh,
anything around them. And I think it's important sometimes for us to, say who we are. That's one of the reasons whenever people show up, I always like to read their biography, so that people don't imagine that they just, young people watching understand that there's a path that you take in order to get there. And, your grandmother Agnes and your aunts, Winifred and Myrtle and Odessa and these people. I mean, they're proud of you, and similarly, I think, you know, you carry them with you, and it's always good to reflect them whenever. I mean, I that's my personal view, right? I always like to take all of the people who put me in a particular place with me, so that we understand that uh, there's no separation between myself and the circumstances that molded me. Because sometimes
Certainly,
we can, yeah,
certainly, and I personally feel as though I have no choice but to carry them with me, even if I were
yeah.
minded to drop them off along the way. They are so immersed into my DNA that I have to carry them with me.
One of the things when I was reading, I think I read maybe it might have been a Kaichor News piece, and you mentioned something there about like when you were 8. What happened when you were 8?
My mother became unwell when I was 8, and that changed life radically for me because mom has always been the closest person to me, and she has treated me in that way for as long as I could remember. Even during the course of her illness, she continues to look out for me. So when she became ill, and I was forced to mature from that relatively tender age because my responsibilities shifted to now taking care of her instead of having her take care of me in the way that I was accustomed to. Sometimes she would say to me that I've spent more of my life being a father to her than she's had the opportunity to be a mother to me. But for the period of time that I've had her in that state of health, and even during the course of time that I continue to have her while she is unwell, right? Her contributions to my growth and to my mentality are indispensable.
Yeah, that's a profound realization that like when you're an 8-year old, it's like how did I mean in a way speak to how that like would have shaped your what like what happened there, like how did that shape your approach to like education and how you saw your future. I mean, because that's one of the things I've really appreciated about learning about you is like you've held jobs like like security guard, minibus. I mean, I say that because I similar. I mean, I didn't have a lot of jobs, but I remember my first job. I was, they used to have these cinemas in Kitty, and I remember going there and and cleaning up the floor and so on. For a good time while I was on a little break, and that was like my first actual work. And I've always felt, that it's important for people to work and to work in, challenging circumstances and work from the ground up. It's a good thing. It helps to build a character for it. But I was thinking about like how do you do that and go to UG and do all. I mean, give a sense of how you manage this thing.
All right, so I just want to back up a little. One of the things I say to my children every so often that I envy them, and it's not the classical type of envy where you have that negative feelings towards some benefit that somebody has. But I look at how fortunate they are, and I impress upon them their good fortunes, and I say to them that I didn't have the benefit of a childhood in the traditional sense because I surrendered my childhood relatively early after I realized that mom needed me in a certain way. And that need was not just my being there and assisting with the ordinary things, that need evolved into a material need as well. So, from a tender age, I had to start thinking in an enterprising way. I tell my kids every so often that one of my sons, he's about to turn 6 years old in a couple of days. At 6 years old, I was traveling from Grove to Georgetown on my own. At 6 years old, I was washing my own clothes. Perhaps at 8 years old, I was already cooking. That was my type of socialization. As a young person, then I didn't understand the import of that type of socialization until I turned 8, and the use of those skills became really material,
Mm.
right? So I started focusing on earning at a relatively tender age. And this is not an indictment against the rest of my extended family, my aunts and grandmother, and whom I lived with. They continue to provide to the best of their abilities, but my mother's illness took a lot of everybody's resources. So I
Mm.
recognize those gaps, and I felt that there was some sense of responsibility for me to contribute towards bridging those gaps. At the age of 11, I started walking and selling on the streets together with one of my brother-in-laws. I was selling like glass sets and other glass sets, pins, needles, all of these things that persons really needed back then in our rudimentary type of environment and upbringing. And that type of thinking and socialization remained with me as the need simultaneously remained for me to provide for mom. So throughout my school life, I've been more or less what I term hustling, making ends meet, and I've always been one of those. I was considered to be one of those gifted students, and I say that with humility, of course. I've always distinguished myself in school, but confronting life through that prism impressed upon me the the the, the elemental need for a good education, and I saw education as a way out for me, as a way out of those circumstances. But even while I existed in those circumstances, I appreciated that I needed to do whatever I needed to do to survive and to be able to provide. So I did all of those odd jobs you mentioned while I was going to high school, while I was going to university. I worked as a bus conductor. I worked on occasions as a minibus tout. I work as a construction worker, as a laborer in the construction industry. I did pipe installation. I did virtually what was available to make ends meet.
Yeah. You see, these are the kinds of people who should be in political office. I think that's jokingly, but that's the truth, right? The point is, you need people who have had the experience of living, who have lived a life of you know genuine resilience to move from that adversity to advocacy. To it's the hope is that become so you never forget these experiences, and these
Not
experiences
at all.
remind
Not
you
at
of what other people who sit in these circumstances face. I wanted. So, how did the legal career develop? This was the thing that I wanted. Like, how did he get to law? What happened here? How did that? Was it? Well, you tell me.
I had absolutely no enthusiasm to become an attorney.
Yeah.
And a lot of persons are taken aback when I say boldly that my aspirations growing up were to become a gangster. I genuinely wanted to become a gangster because after my mother became unwell, right, my socialization expanded to incorporate those elements that we refer to as the unsavory elements. Right, I've run around with the persons who are quote unquote gangsters because those are the persons who were looking out for me sometimes when I wanted to make ends meet. And there was one point when I started to glorify that lifestyle. And my thinking was, I rather live 10 years fast with access to all of the resources, illicit as that access may be, rather than to live 20 years going through hardships and struggles. So I genuinely wanted to become a gangster. And one of my really close friends, his cousin, a gentleman by the name of Devon Brown. I used to play basketball and so with Devon and some other folks, and I was extremely hot tempered. And one day Devon said to me, he said, I cannot understand how you could be so intelligent and so stupid at the same time. And I saw that as an opportunity, as an opening for me to let him in. And I started sharing with him some of the challenges and hardship I confronted because during the course of my mother's illness, I confronted an overwhelming assortment of trauma that compounded that temperament and, more or less made me numb at one point in time. So that's why it was so easy for me to find that gangster type of socialization appealing. And Devon started inviting me out at 5 o'clock in the morning to a churchyard so that we can practice basketball. But soon I began to realize what is it he was doing. He was using the opportunity to help me to chart a different course. So he began to ask, certain probing questions, and I would answer those questions candidly, and then he started to veil certain, means to me, so that things were not as tough as I confronted them. And he said to me, what constructive outlet can you think about so that you can pour in this trauma and this passion that you have? And I told him, writing. At that time, I glorified rap music. I grew up on Tupac Shakur, Notorious Big, and these guys. So, as an uh, offshoot of that musical socialization, I started doing poetry, and then I started doing rap music as well. So, he encouraged me to start writing. So I started writing poetry, and it is in those circumstances that my appetite for writing developed, and I still write extensively today. But
Yeah.
more to the point, so I completed high school. So I was one of the top students at my primary school. So I went into I attended centralized school in circumstances where I probably should have gone to perhaps Bishops
Well, you should say
or
I
St.
went to
Francis
Central Primary
College.
School, so I went to Central Primary School on Smythe Street and on Brickdown. Yeah, so you
Yes,
know,
yes.
yes, yes.
And I distinguished myself at Central as well. And after Central, I did land surveying. Then I did international relations at the university, and then I went on to do civil and building engineering. And I was always one of those advocate types. In all of my school experience, I've been advocating for social justice. So that spilled over into the working environment. So I think that in those circumstances, law was kind of like a natural progression for me.
I see. I see. So the law really came out of the sort of advocacy in some way. I have to say,
Yes.
my father, who passed away some years ago, was a land surveyor. So land surveying is a career that's very dear to my heart, and it helped me to see quite a bit of Guyana. I mean, so I'm a little older than you are, but one of the key projects there was the Upper Mazaruni Road Development Project, and this took my father and many other people at that time into the interior, and I would spend many a time out of school in the interior. So all the places, Chamari, Baruni, Lion Mountain, going through Linden, Rockstone, and Sharima Crossing, and all these places. Land surveyors. So land surveyors are very important.
And
And
that gives you an insight into how beautiful
yeah,
and majestic our
it
country is.
is. Yes, it's a very big place. I think many people don't fully appreciate how big it is and how beautiful it is. And
That is so
uh,
true.
yeah, so I see you now. I kind of, so in terms of the law, the you've you know you went to the University of Guyana, and then you went to, did you go to Hugh Wooding also
I did
did
go
you
to
go
you.
to Wooding also? Yeah, and then you came back and set up your practice. And
Yeah, so
did you,
so
did you go directly to practice, or did you like take a few, work with people and build yourself up, or did you already have a client list and you're ready to roll?
well, before I went off to U Wooding, I worked with Mr. Hughes as a paralegal.
So
And
you worked with, well, he was
I,
also,
I work with Mr. Hughes as
interesting.
a paralegal. And Mr. Hughes is one of the persons that I continue to look up to. Mr. Hughes has been really instrumental in my academic and professional growth, and it is something that I will continue to be grateful for as long as I have the gift of life. Mr. Hughes is really a remarkable mentor, and he's one of those selfless persons who has taken a lot of us young academics and young attorneys on his wings. So I just want to take the liberty of thanking him for that. So I had the coveted fortune of working with Mr. Hughes for 2 years as a paralegal before I went off to law school, which he, of course, was instrumental in as well. And that really assisted my experience at law school and contributed to my growth as an attorney after I graduated and came into practice. So I spent my early years practicing in Trinidad. So as soon as I came out, as soon as I graduated, I apprenticed with one of the senior attorneys there. And from the outset, I started making a mark, having had the benefit of working with Mr. Hughes. So growth for me in the legal circle had been relatively expeditious, so to speak. So I practiced in Trinidad from 2014 when I was called to the bar until 2019 when I returned to Guyana. But in the interim, I would come home every so often, and every time I came home, I anchored at Mr. Yu's office, and I would assist him with work once I'm home. So in 2019, Mr. Hughes invited me to come back to Guyana so that I could resume work with him. He was of the view that that is the natural place for me to be. So I answered the call and took the opportunity to come back home. It was only last January that I branched out on my own and started my own firm with a colleague of mine.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I get it now. Or at least I have a better sense now of the arc of things, and in a sense, that you see. So what is clear now is that this service orientation in you kind of is deep, and So now I want to get the sense of how you came to this politics, because I would have had the sense that you would have been invited by various people to get involved in politics, and you only got involved in it in this last cycle. What changed? What would have led you in this direction? I mean, I can see now the service, but you were doing this all the time. Now, what caused you to kind of take the next step and say, okay, look, I'm going to compete in this political arena to be able to be a more effective servant of the people?
Well, I wouldn't say that anything had changed radically when I answered the call in this electoral cycle. I would articulate it by saying that I was deployed at that time. So I'll have to backpedal a bit so you can understand what I mean by being deployed. I consider myself to be a highly spiritual person, and I've always, from my relatively tender years, to try to maintain a close relationship with God. I've not always been the most upright and the most diligent in pursuing that relationship, but it's one of the things that I've always held dear to. And from a relatively tender age, I received that deposit from God that said to me that the core purpose that I've brought you here for is to serve your countrymen and to contribute to the positive growth and the positive changes that our countrymen need. Being relatively young, I did not understand the import of that deposit and that call to purpose, so to speak. So, as I've indicated earlier, my natural disposition has always been one of uh, advocating for social and economic justice. And I think that I'm one of those persons who confirm to the maxim that a man oftentimes reaches his destiny on the very road that he takes to avoid it. I have I have tried my level best to steer clear of anything political, but I always find myself back on the political path.
Right.
So, if you do some amount of research, you would see from since in the early 2000s, I have been advocating in the public space for. I've been writing extensively on legal, political, and social issues, and I think that my writings, firstly, have attracted a wide cross section of support, both locally and in the diaspora. And as a consequence, persons across all of the political parties have reached out to me over the years, inviting me to uh, enter mainstream politics. And
Mhm.
I've indicated to them that while I appreciate and I'm humbled by the kind invitation, that I would not make that step until I am deployed, until God says to me that I'm ready to release you. And I got that release prior to this electoral cycle. And even when I got that release, I didn't immediately answer those calls. I consulted with uh, my religious leaders. I asked them, what they were sensing in the realm of the spirit, because I'm a firm believer that we live in a parallel universe. We live in a universe that exists both in the spiritual and in the natural. And what operates in the natural is really a manifestation of what obtains in the spiritual. So I consulted with them for their religious guidance. I engaged them to, pray for that revelation as well. And once I was settled that I was deployed in this season, then I was ready to answer that call, which I did.
So, and so any I have to say one of the strongest I think one of the strongest resonant calls in the advocacy on behalf of the APNU platform and on behalf of uh, the candidate Aubrey Norton. I think I listened to you in one thing saying, "Look, I'm a father, and these are my children, and I'm you know lining up behind this leadership because I think it makes the best sense for my children." And I thought that was an extremely resonant call, probably one of the strongest calls on the side of but what I wanted to know, what outside of the spiritual dimension. So I like to think of myself as a as a as a Christian, but as a kind of very secular Christian, and so I always want to see the logic for it. So I go to the church from time to time, but I don't. I mean, my spiritual life is, I think, more internal, and I carry the logical life more external. So the question I wanted to ask here is, you know, what was it about the party platform and perhaps the leadership of our Norton that resonated with you, that felt that this was the moment, you were giving the sort of being deployed, and this is the direction I want to go. What was it there that you said, this is where I want to plant the stake?
Before I answer the question with respect to Mr. Norton particularly, I want to make the observation that when I've said before on the public platform that I fancy that I'm confident that I have been deployed in this season. I know that I minded that that did not resonate well with a lot of people who perhaps don't consider themselves to be spiritual. And it doesn't seem a particularly seductive proposition that, here is someone who is saying that they have been deployed spiritually to, operate in the political arena. But that is something that I stand resolutely by. And that physical manifestation is that I was directed to the APNU and under the leadership of Mr. Norton. I was a student of Mr. Norton when I did international relations at the university. I was a student of political science. And I've always been impressed by not only the depth of his lecture, but his uprightness as a person. And he came across then as one of those no nonsense persons. And to a lot of people, he seemed a bit crude, but I think that persons who are crude, those are usually the persons who are frank and upright. You don't have to wonder whether they have ulterior motives, what resonates beneath the surface. And he is really one of those types of individuals. And that view has been fortified when I engage with him during the political campaign season and even as I continue to engage with him. Mr. Norton, hands down, is one of the most upright characters in the political arena, in the contemporary political arena locally. And there is nobody who can debate that successfully with any degree of honesty and forthrightness, so to speak. And I was confident in what Mr. Norton offered in terms of the quality of that leadership and in terms of the vision for the party and the vision for the country. I minded it Guyana Business Journal. I'm not sure whether you were the scrutineer and the author of the I like to think of it as a forensic analysis of the APNU manifesto. But whether
No,
you, Uma,
I certainly, or folks here did. And look, I think I was kind of way leading to that. I could see already why this would be your choice, because I genuinely think that on purely, on purely, on purely the grounds of so the question we asked ourselves was, which manifesto, if implemented, would in the shortest period of time mitigate the poverty in Guyana in the shortest way. So, the rough number that everyone went with, about 48% of the people are, and I think, we compared all across the manifestos, and there was no question that the APNU manifesto would, in the shortest period of time, rapidly reduce poverty if the plans that were in the manifesto were implemented. So no question about that. I mean, there were other things which would arise, the questions of, potential things for inflation, etc. But on the central point about which one would move poverty rapidly in the other direction, there was no question about it. So in a way, I was in my notes, I was sort of cheating, because I kind of suspected, given where you've led up here, that this was probably the reason that someone like you, in addition to the spiritual call, that someone who has a kind of service disposition in your background would have lined up. Yeah, but no question about it. It's counterfactual now, but I certainly, how did that experience? That's a good question. Like how would you view that experience of having gone through the campaign and the challenges that campaign that emerged in the context of the campaign? How does this inform your political vision now? And I'm looking to something. I want to sort of think about, like, how do you see yourself now? you know, experienced, wiser? You know, did it, you know, is the vision sharpened, you know, resolved, you know, 2030, you know, that sort of, you know, that sort of thing. I'm ready for it now. You know, tell us.
So for me, what a campaign basically was is an extension of what I've been doing for a number
Yeah,
of years.
yeah,
I've operated in spaces where the quote unquote ordinary man uh, where the ordinary man exists. And I've always taken the liberty of engaging with the ordinary man, of getting a sense as to what is it motivates him, what is it inspires him, what is it affects him, you know, getting insight into some of his challenges, the occasions he has for celebration, what would change his life positively. So, what a campaign has done for me is to multiply that quite exponentially. And, you know, it was really an opportunity to be informed from, you know, what can contribute from a perspective of what can inform concrete, realistic, and people centered policy as we chart a course forward for the collective growth and development of our countrymen. And I think that the manifesto has captured that effectively. Now, the journey has definitely contributed to a widening of my worldview. It has certainly enlarged my network, both at the grassroots level and at the professional and perhaps the wider resource level. And I am encouraged. I'm really encouraged. And, you know, I have no doubt that this is the right choice for me. I have no doubt that I'm with the right party. And I have no doubt that we are on the right path despite our setbacks. And I remain resolute in continuing to contribute to charting that course forward.
no, I think certainly I so let's maybe talk a little bit about the future and you know, maybe specifically around young people. What are some of the things that you envisage in the walk now that you know, some concrete plans for youth empowerment that you are going to be advocating for as you go forward?
So I've been engaging with a lot of young people on the campaign trail, and one of the things I've cataloged names and numbers of the young people, well, virtually everybody that I've engaged with, and a wide cross section of the persons I've engaged with are young people, and I continue to engage with them on a near daily basis, right? To come so that I can, you know, keep afresh in terms of the visions that they have, in terms of, you know, the things which are affecting them, and in terms of the change that they want to see, even as we go forward, and even as the dynamics of our political climate and atmosphere keeps changing. And one of the core aspects of our campaign has been youth empowerment. And that is something that we maintain fidelity to. I've seen the Ghana Business Journal as interrogated and scrutinized our youth empowerment strategy, the various social reliefs, social and economic reliefs we had proposed for the youths in terms of enlarging the minimum wage, the rent to own housing opportunities, the allocation of house lots to newly minted adults, the provision of support systems for persons who are engaging or pursuing a higher level of academia, and also catering to the needs of our sportsmen and women. We will continue to champion those causes. We will continue to push for those initiatives. I understand now that our reality has radically changed because we don't have the reins of government where we can ensure that we resource those initiatives. But it doesn't bar us from continuing to advocate for those things. I remember when I participated in student politics at the Ewing Law School, I served as a student representative council president, which is, and the politics there is really a microcosm of the national politics in Trinidad and the national politics in Guyana, which are not radically different from each other, right? One of the things I told my competitors there was that we are better suited for cooperation than we are suited for competition. And I'm minded that the nature of the political environment is that we compete, and that competition has, carved out oceans in the part of our people where bridges really should be built. And one of the things that we have to appreciate that Guyana cannot be taken to where it needs to be taken um, by any single political party, any single political entity, or any single political movement, because large, uh, we have large ethnic blocks, which quite unfortunately uh, resonate with the racial composition and sometimes the crude racial leanings of various political parties. So if we don't find a way to bridge that gap, we're always going to have um, a misallocation of our resources and inequitable allocation of our resources. We're always going to have ethnic insecurity. So even in envisioning the way forward for our youths, and our youths have to play an instrumental part in that conversation, they have to contribute to that trajectory, because the youths really have to come together and say, listen, we want a different political reality. We hold the power in the society because we are the largest voting bloc. And one of our core advocacy going forward would really be to invigorate the youths so that we can have those conversations, so that we can coordinate those advocacy, while we simultaneously advocate for the government to see the wisdom in implementing some of those policies that we have been advocating for.
No, I think you're right. I think you make a very important point, and I think you make it quite eloquently. Guyana can't grow to actualize its full potential if all of her people are not pulling in the same direction, or at least there's not a structure in which everyone feels a part of what is going on. And I think that it's in that context that I think what you said there's important, and my heart is certainly pleased to know that someone like you and others, young people like you, are going to continue to engage this breach to bring us to a more, as the Americans would say, a more perfect union. But I do think you've hit the nail on the head, which is you can't, often I think people talk about these things and you can't separate. I mean, you can't split, go someplace else. There's no place else to go. Everyone is there. And so you have to find a way to work it out. And you have to get it to the place where young people are genuinely engaged, I believe, in the competition of ideas and not in the competition of ethnicities or not in the competitions of race. And that have historically plagued us. I mean, I think even now, I mean, quite often we see the discussions around race. I mean, certainly in the context of this campaign, that was a subtext in lots of very interesting ways. I always point out to my friends a kind of, there's always a sense of progress whenever there's a sense that Afro-Guyanese voted for non-Afro-Guyanese candidates. But I often, ask them to look in the other direction to see whether or not there is a similar kind of expectation of non-Afro or Indo-Guyanese voting with. And so those are conversations that are going to be very, very difficult they're going to continue to be difficult, and they're only going to be solved, at least in my view, at the level of our youth. And I think what you're proposing here, to kind of have these deep and serious conversations with our young people about, what kind of country do you imagine that we should live in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, and what is the sort of work that we have to do in order to get there? And so I think I feel very pleased by your response to that question. And I'm looking at the time; it's already. You see, that's why you have to do these kinds of conversations where you can get a chance to really know someone, to really have a sense of what that person is thinking, where they're coming from, and I have to go to the end of my. So I had a whole section prepared about the diaspora, but
I'm so sorry.
I'll skip the diaspora, so I won't.
But if I may, Terence, if you permit me briefly to address that diaspora issue, because I know that a lot of the diaspora tune in to your program, and I'm minded, of course, that you are part and parcel of the diaspora. So I don't want the diaspora to feel neglected from this conversation, because the diaspora is certainly instrumental. I think too oftentimes we see the diaspora as, to put it crudely, just a cash cow that funnels remittances into Guyana. And I know that remittance is quite enormous. In 2023, I think it was as much as 550 million US funneled into our country.
Now, in spite of the sort of oil and all of that, but I mean, it's evident, right? We just talked about the poverty rates, and so it's not surprising, I think, that you have a large, the remittance flows have not gone away, right? Yeah. Sorry about that. I jumped in.
No worries at all. In my humble estimation, the diaspora is a jumbo pot of untapped potential in the context of our quote unquote rapid growth and development. You are in the diaspora. You have been contributing to the conversations in Guyana's progress, and I know that you have enormous commitments with what you do there, academically and professionally. But you still carve out the time to contribute to our intellectual space, to our policy considerations. And I know a lot of other persons in the diaspora have been contributing in similar and diverse manners. As a matter of fact, one of my primary mentors is from the diaspora. And I take it for granted that he's watching this program. And I'm going to say to him through you that, while I'm not having the benefit of remittances from him, and perhaps I'm advocating for remittances from him here.
That's funny. Yeah.
I remain
tremendously President Ali, I noted, gave some remarks about the diaspora, and I still think, just as a diaspora policy, it's still kind of having a meeting and having people show up and take a photo, but the substantive policy that comes from thinking through how do we use the people resources that are the Guyanese people resources that exist across the world in a manner that serves the developmental aims of Guyana, and how do we do it? I mean, we've had a full term, and that hasn't sort of moved in some substantive way. And so the question is, how likely will that move in some substantive way in a subsequent term? And I do think that young politicians, advocates, leaders like yourself, that is a question to consider deeply and to have some clarity on because it can impact where you end up in the political space, right? I mean, you know, unfortunately, our time is. We'll have to schedule another. So I think this we have to schedule something where it goes one part where you talk about Guyana, and then maybe some other part where you kind of have a vision about you know the diaspora, or something on the island gas sector.
I am
Yeah,
really eager.
the time is.
I'm really eager to
Yeah,
flesh out a new program. Of course, that vision that I have for the diaspora contributions. To complete the thought I was sharing just now, my mentor who lives out in the diaspora has contributed tremendously to the enlargement of my worldview. And I did not have the benefit of the knowledge he's amassing in the diaspora, the resources he's amassing in the diaspora, then my worldview would not have been as enlarged as I can boast today. And that is just one person through a single channel we're talking about. And we have tremendous resources in terms of material resources, technical resources, human capital resources in the diaspora that we can definitely take advantage of in a reciprocally beneficial relationship.
yeah. I'm sorry. We've come to the end. Attorney Daniels, I really want to thank you for sharing the story, the vision with us tonight, and the journey from Linden, Grove, halls of justice, leadership of the helm of the political arena. It's a truly inspiring stuff. And
So
but
much.
I think for me, most evident is, I feel, you can feel it in the thing. I feel your commitment to service, and it's clearly evident in what you do. And I hope that you can continue in this vein. And I'll say thank you to the viewers and so on, and you know, and then give you the last word. Uh, you know, any as we close, like your final message for young people, folks here in the diaspora who are looking, folks who supported you in the campaign and now think, where do we go from here? Uh, folks who didn't support you in the campaign and thinking, what can you expect from me? How can I, what role I will play in this context? So I'll give you the last bit, and you'll say goodnight on behalf of all.
Thank you ever so much, Terence. And it's really a tremendous honor to be here and to have the opportunity. To even the folks who were not standing in my corner, who were not supporting me during the course of the campaign, my advocacy continues to be even on your behalf. My advocacy is not geared towards only those who see the merit in what I'm doing. I advocate for a better Guyana for each and every one of us, resident and non resident. And I want to say to our young people, especially, don't lose hope. Hope is the absolute last thing that must die. Once you have the breath of life, you have the opportunity to contribute to whatever space you occupy, and you have the opportunity to contribute positively to that space. And you have the opportunity to contribute to the growth conversations as we carve out the direction we want our country to grow in. You are the stakeholders in where Guyana goes. The diaspora, the persons in the diaspora are the stakeholders into where Guyana goes. We can't do this without you. We need every single hand on deck. Right? This is a journey for us collectively, and no contribution is an immaterial contribution. I want to thank you again, Terence. I want to thank the viewers. And Samora Michelle would always say, Allure continue, the struggle continues. And let us continue that struggle collectively.
Indeed continues. Thank you very, very much. Thank you all.
Thank you ever so much.